welcome to the Wedge. And this is the Week 5 edition, and as always, we'll be giving our quick picks, our fantasy fortune football picks, as well as the weekly rewind for Week 4, and the upon further review for the Thursday night matchup between Minnesota and Green Bay. But let's get things started off with the quick picks. Quick picks! On Thursday night football, we got the Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers, and I'm taking the Packers in that game. Then on Sunday at 1 o'clock, we've got the Atlanta Falcons at the New York Giants. I'm going with the Giants. Then we have the Buffalo Bills at the Detroit Lions. I'm taking the Detroit Lions. Then we have the Chicago Bears at the Carolina Panthers, and I'm going with the Panthers. Then we have the Cleveland Browns at the Tennessee Titans. I'm taking the Cleveland Browns on the road. Then we have the Houston Texans going to Dallas to face the Cowboys in the Battle of Texas, and I'm taking the Texans. Then we have the Baltimore Ravens going to Indianapolis to face the Colts. I'm going with the Colts. We have the St. Louis Rams at the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm going with the Eagles in that game. Then we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to New Orleans to face the Saints, and I'm taking the Saints. In the last 1 o'clock game, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm taking the Steelers on the road. Then at 4 o'clock, we have the Arizona Cardinals and the Denver Broncos, and I'm taking the Cardinals on the road. Then we have the Kansas City Chiefs at the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going with the Niners. Then we have the New York Jets at the San Diego Chargers, and I'm going with the Chargers. Then for Sunday night football in prime time, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals going to New England to face the Patriots, and I'm going with the Patriots. Then on Monday night football, we have the Seattle Seahawks going to Washington to face the Redskins, and I'm going with the Seahawks. So those are the quick picks for Week 5. Quick pick! And now it's time for Fantasy Fortune.
Fantasy Fortune!
At quarterback, I like Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers at home against Minnesota. Rodgers put up big numbers last week, and he should do again so this week at home against his division rival. Although Minnesota did put up a lot of points against the Falcons, I think this game should be pretty high scoring, at least on the Green Bay end, and Rodgers should get some good numbers. I also like Nick Foles as the Eagles host the Rams, and they should put up big numbers against the Rams. Foles struggled last week in San Francisco as the offense of Philadelphia did not score a touchdown, but I fully expect them to bounce back in Week 5 against the Rams at home. Then at running back, we have Rashad Jennings of the New York Giants as the Giants host the Falcons. Rashad Jennings has been running pretty good for the Giants this year, and against the Atlanta Falcons defense, he should put up some big numbers. Also like DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys hosting the Texans. Of course, the Texans have somewhat of a tough defense, but they are susceptible to the run, and DeMarco Murray is the top runner in the NFL, so he should continue to run well in Week 5. Then at receiver, I like Percy Harvin of the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to the Redskins on Monday night. I think he's going to be a big part of this game as they should work him into the offense. He could score on the ground or through the air. Should put up some big numbers on both sides. Also like Randall Cobb, as he has been one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite targets. Jordy Nelson gets a lot of targets as well, but Randall Cobb also, he gets in the end zone, is usually good for a touchdown. So I like Randall Cobb against Minnesota. Then at tight end, I like Martellus Bennett, the Chicago Bears, going to Carolina to face the Panthers. The Panthers got a tough defense, but Martellus Bennett has been putting up big numbers all year long. Should have picked him earlier in the year, but right here, I think that Carolina, Pittsburgh kind of exposed them, and Martellus Bennett should be a big part of this game for the Bears. Carolina is, going to be keying on the receivers, and they're going to be busy with Forte, and that's going to open up Bennett as he's going to just continue to have a great season there for the Bears. Then at kicker, I like Phil Dawson of the San Francisco 49ers. They're hosting the Chiefs. And the Chiefs had a big game against the Patriots. It seems their defense is revitalized, and that should make Phil Dawson a very busy man this weekend. Of course, we shall see, but I think he's going to get his attempts. I think the Chiefs are going to actually hold the Niners possibly to field goals. I do expect the Niners to get in there a few times, but I think Phil Dawson should get some extra points and some field goals, as they should be able to put up points against the Chiefs. Then on defense, I like the Seattle Seahawks, as they're going to Washington on the Monday night game. I think the Seahawks are going to have one of the best defensive games of the year. It's in prime time. They should get some turnovers and have a really big game. They always shine in prime time. So that's the fantasy fortune picks for Week 5.
Fantasy Fortunes.
And now it's time for the Weekly Rewind. And in the Weekly Rewind, we go over the week that was. And for this Weekly Rewind, we'll be going over Week 4. We go over our quick picks and our fantasy fortunes from Week 4. We also look at the top fantasy players from Week 4, as well as the top stat lines for Week 4. Well, for each week, and this one happens to be Week 4. We did things a little different last week, but this week let's get started with the top stat lines. Let's look at the top 5 quarterbacks for Week 4. And the number 1 quarterback in Week 4 was Andrew Luck of the Indianapolis Colts against the Tennessee Titans. He had 393 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Number 2 was Phillip Rivers of the San Diego Chargers against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had 377 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Then at number 3, we had Drew Brees of the New Orleans Saints going against the Dallas Cowboys. He's the only one of the top 5 that lost. And he had 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Then at number 4, we have Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens, and he went up against the Carolina Panthers. He had 327 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And at number 5, we have Teddy Bridgewater in his first NFL start, and that was against the Atlanta Falcons. He started for the Minnesota Vikings. He had 317 passing yards in that game. He didn't throw for a touchdown, but he actually ran for one. Now let's look at the top 5 rushing leaders for Week 4. At number 1, we have DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys. And against the Saints, he had 149 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Then number 2, we had Jerick McKinnon of the Minnesota Vikings. Against the Atlanta Falcons, he had 135 rushing yards. Then at number 3, we had Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears. He's only one of the top 5 rushers to lose, and that was against the Packers. He had 122 rushing yards. We had Frank Gore of the San Francisco 49ers coming in at number 4 against the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 119 rushing yards. Then rounding out the top 5, we have Knile Davis of the Kansas City Chiefs. And on Monday night against the Patriots, he ran for 107 yards. So that's your top 5 rushers of Week 4. Now let's look at the top 5 receivers. Number 1, we have Steve Smith of the Baltimore Ravens going up against the Carolina Panthers. He had 7 receptions for 139 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. Then number 2, we had Keenan Allen, the San Diego Chargers, who had 10 receptions for 135 yards. Then number 3, we had Martellus Bennett of the Chicago Bears. He had 9 receptions for 134 yards. Then number 4, we had Jarius Wright of the Minnesota Vikings, and he had 8 receptions for 132 yards. Then number 5, we had Antonio Brown of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he lost to the Bucs. The Steelers lost to the Bucs, as did the Bears lost to the Packers, as the Martellus Bennett and Antonio Brown were the 2 in the top 5 of the receivers to lose. But for Antonio Brown in that game, he had 7 receptions for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. So those are your top 5 receivers for Week 4, and those are your top offensive stat lines for Week 4. Now let's look at your top fantasy players of Week 4. And the top quarterback was Eli Manning. He had 300 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. He threw 1 interception, but he ran for a touchdown to add to his 4 touchdowns throwing to make it 5 total touchdowns for Eli. And he had 32 fantasy points. So Eli Manning was the top quarterback for Week 4. Number 2, we had Andrew Luck. He had 393 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. and that gave him 29 fantasy points to be the number 2 fantasy quarterback of Week 4. And rounding out the top 3 fantasy players of Week 4, we had Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers for 302 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. He also rushed for 8 yards. And they gave him a total of 28 fantasy points. So that's your top 3 fantasy quarterbacks of Week 4. Now for our top running backs for Week 4, we had Matt Asiata of the Minnesota Vikings. He had 78 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 22 receiving yards, and that gave him 29 fantasy points. As Matt Asiata really showed up there in Week 4 in that big win for Minnesota over the Falcons. Then number 2, we have DeMarco Murray of the Dallas Cowboys. He had 149 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He also had 6 receiving yards. And he had a total of 26 fantasy points to be the number 2 fantasy running back of Week 4. Rounding out the top 3 fantasy running backs of Week 4, we have Frank Gore of the San Francisco 49ers, who had 119 rushing yards, 55 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown for a total of 22 fantasy points. So that's your top 3 running backs for fantasy in Week 4. Now receiver, the top receiver in Week 4 for fantasy was Steve Smith of the Baltimore Ravens. He had 139 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. That gave him 25 fantasy points, and he was the top receiver for Week 4. The number 2 receiver for Week 4 was Antonio Brown of the Pittsburgh Steelers with 131 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns for a total of 25 fantasy points. And the number 3 receiver for Week 4 was Randall Cobb of the Green Bay Packers with 113 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and 23 fantasy points. So Randall Cobb rounds it out for the top 3 receivers. Then at tight end, we had Larry Donnell of the New York Giants, who had 54 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, and 23 fantasy points. Then we had Heath Miller, number 2, of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 85 receiving yards and 1 touchdown for 14 fantasy points. And number 3, we had Delaney Walker of the Tennessee Titans with 84 receiving yards and 1 touchdown for 14 fantasy points. So those are your top 3 tight ends. And the kicker, we had a 2-way tie for first place between Nick Novak of the San Diego Chargers and Blair Walsh of the Minnesota Vikings. They each kicked 4 field goals and 3 extra points for 17 fantasy points. Walsh did miss 1 field goal, but that doesn't matter. And the best defense of Week 4, surprisingly enough, was the Philadelphia Eagles. Even though they lost to the San Francisco 49ers, they allowed 26 points, but they got 1 interception and 3 defensive touchdowns because the punt returns count as touchdowns, and they had 4 sacks, and that gave them 23 fantasy points. So that was a wild week there in fantasy. And an interesting side note with Larry Donnell, the tight end of the New York Giants, he sat himself on his own fantasy team. And because of that, he ended up losing in his fantasy football. So how about that one? Larry Donnell sits himself, and then he goes out and freaking catches 3 touchdowns. And because of that, he ended up losing in his fantasy. So it just goes to show even the players themselves don't necessarily know when they're going to have a big game or a big week fantasy-wise. So if Larry Donnell would have known, he would have kept himself in his own lineup. That's the top fantasy players. Now let's look at the quick picks for Week 4. In Week 4, I'll tell you, it did good on the day games, 70% on the day games, but 0 for 3 on the prime time games. All the nighttime games I got wrong. I'll tell you, it's embarrassing. I can't believe it. Of course, hindsight's 2020, but I'm definitely kicking myself over those picks. I should have known better. I mean, what was I thinking picking the Giants, or not picking the Giants, going into Washington to face the Redskins? I should have picked the Giants, but instead somehow I bought into the whole Kirk Cousins hype, which is ridiculous because it's not like he's won anything. But the Giants too, I mean, I thought off of the short week, the week they had, I didn't think they were going to come out like that, but Eli, he showed that, at any time he can pull off a miracle. Not like it really was a miracle, it was just a really good game by Eli. He had huge stats. I mean, the 5 total touchdowns says it all. The Giants just put a whooping on the Redskins, and like I said, I'm embarrassed to say I even picked the Redskins. And the same with the other primetime games. The Saints. I thought, like how could they possibly go 1-3? That was really the only thing that had me picking them. See, when I was doing upon further review, I was like thinking, why am I picking the Saints? And I said, the only really thing is I just don't think they're gonna go 1-3. But I was wrong. And like I say, if you're looking inside the numbers, really they told you everything you need to know about that game, and that was that the Cowboys are a really good team at running the ball. DeMarco Murray is having a great season. Cowboys are 3-1 because of DeMarco Murray, and they won that game big in prime time. And then another blowout in prime time on Monday night, the Chiefs and the Patriots. A little biased, picked the Patriots. The Chiefs hadn't really been that impressive. They did have that win down in Miami, where the Patriots lost. The Patriots were looking really good. The last couple weeks their defense was playing really good, but their defense did not show up against the Chiefs. Jamal Charles was running wild. He was scoring touchdowns, and it got ugly. The Patriots, they actually let up more yards in the first half than they ever have under the Bill Belichick era. So in the whole time Bill Belichick's been the coach there in New England, they had never let up that many total offensive yards in a half of football. It was over 300 yards in the first half for the Chiefs. So they really put a whooping on them, and Tom Brady even ended up coming out the game. It was just so out of control. It was out of hand, and it was impossible to come back, so they just took him out of there for safety's sake. Brady's been struggling, but hey, that happens, and I do believe Patriots are going to bounce back, and I do believe Brady's going to bounce back. Not every year is going to be 50 touchdowns, you know what I mean? But if you look at the day games, the games that I got wrong, I picked Chicago, and that was mainly why I picked them. If it was in Green Bay, I would have picked the Packers. Didn't think the Packers would beat them that bad, but I'm not really that surprised. I'll tell you, I am surprised with the Buccaneers beating the Steelers in Pittsburgh. The Steelers look so strong against Carolina, and then they go and lose to the Bucs. But that was an exciting game, and I'll tell you, Mike Lennon made the difference. And I mean, he's underrated, Mike Lennon, and that one really, it was crazy the way it came down the wire. And after the game, you saw in the press conference, Mike Tomlin was talking about, you can't win. We have 13 penalties for 125 yards, I think it was. But it was 13 penalties, and so he's like, you penalize that much, you're not going to win in the National Football League. They gave him basically a free touchdown with that many penalty yards. And at the end of the game, it was a wild one, and they pulled it off there at the end. It was amazing. The Bucs getting their first win much earlier than they did last year. They were 0-8 last year. This time, here we are. It's the end of September. We're now in October, and they've already got a win. They're 1-3. And then the other one I got wrong was, the Falcons and the Vikings. And hey, who knew in Teddy Bridgewater's first start, he did play last week in week 3, and then he gets to start there in week 4. And he freaking showed and proved. He had a huge game. Asiata also punching it in, even though he wasn't necessarily doing the majority of the work, but he was getting in the end zone. His average a little better than normal, but we'll see how he is moving forward. The Falcons just couldn't stop him. They put up 28 points. Thought they would actually put up maybe more points, but the Vikings defense was able to hold them to enough, and the offense put up enough points. The Falcons just could not stop the Vikings. Teddy Bridgewater looking very impressive in his first game as the starter. We'll see how things go moving forward for Minnesota. And then for the games they got right, Buffalo and Houston, that was a pretty close game. Houston Texans pulled it off. Then we had the Lions and the Jets. The Lions pulled that one off on the road. Wasn't really pretty, but they got the job done. Titans and the Colts, and of course the Colts won big. Not really surprised there. Is after going down 0-2 for the first time in Andrew Luck's career, now they win 2 straight and they even things up. They're going to try to get about 500 here in week 5, but we'll talk more about that and upon further review. So the Dolphins go across the pond to jolly old England. They were in London town and they beat the Raiders. So the Raiders 0-4, they're having a really rough season. Derek Carr, even he got banged up in that game too. The one bright spot, James Jones is alright, but they're really having a rough year there, in Oakland. And the Dolphins, even up their, record there, 500, so they're still in the thick of things in the East. So, in the way the Patriots went down, it's anyone's division, so we'll see what happens there in that East. It's wide open for the first time in a long time. Then we have the Carolina Panthers and the Ravens, and that was a really impressive win for Baltimore, as they're now 3-1, as they just continue to run the ball. They got 3 guys that they give it to: Forsett, Pierce, and Taliaferro, and these guys can run the ball, especially behind that line. Flacco's getting it done too, and that defense is really looking good. So an impressive big win over the Panthers. They beat them by 4 touchdowns. So that's a huge win. And the Panthers, after starting off 2-0, now lost 2 straight. So you have questions going on there in Carolina. Where are they going moving forward? Then we have the Chargers and the Jaguars in San Diego. The Chargers beat them up pretty good. Of course, Blake Bortles actually had a decent game in his first start. And the Chargers actually didn't put up as many points as I thought they might, but they still won pretty comfortably. Of course, they have issues there with their running game. So, without Matthews and with Woodhead gone for the year, they got Donald Brown there running the ball. See what happens moving forward. Of course, Phillip Rivers is one of the top quarterbacks in the league, has been, and showing improving this year. And getting really big performances out of his receivers. He's got plenty of talent there in that receiving core with Floyd and Eddie Royal, and of course the great tight end Antonio Gates. And then the Eagles and the Niners. What an exciting game that was. The Niners pulled it off, and their defense continues to impress. Of course, they were the top defense, like top 3 defense last year, probably top 2, only behind the Seattle. In 2013 for defense. And coming into 2014, thought maybe they, drop off a little, especially with the injuries, but they're not really showing too many signs of a drop off, especially the way they played in week 4 against the Eagles. That high-powered offense, they held them to 0 points. They not only held them out of the end zone, they stopped them from even kicking a field goal, as all 21 points came from special teams and defense. So the Eagles could not score on offense. As the San Francisco 49ers defense continues to look impressive and keep them competitive. Of course, Frank Gore had a huge game as well. So yeah, that's the quick picks for week 4 in the weekly rewind, and we'll take a quick look at the fantasy fortunes. How did they turn out for week 4 in our weekly rewind here segment, as we do. And at quarterback, we had Matt Ryan. He actually did pretty decent, even though they lost. He had 23 points. Phillip Rivers, he did pretty good too. He's one of the top guys. So, that was the 2 guys that put out there, Ryan and Rivers. They both had over 20 points. And Phillip Rivers, I think he was number 2, as I just had said. Of course, I missed on Fred Jackson at running back. He did not do too good. He only had 8 points, but DeMarco Murray, though, I called that one right. Not like as if that's really a tough thing to call. He's only the number 1 running back in the NFL. So not really going out on a limb when I picked him. But he did show up against the Saints there in that game. And then Eddie Royal was pretty close on him. Pretty dead on. I feel pretty good about that one. He had over 20 points. And Randall Cobb from Green Bay, the 2 receivers, Royal and then Cobb. He also had a big day, 23 points. So Royal and Cobb both came through. So far at this point, looking pretty good, except for Fred Jackson. Then Jimmy Graham, disappointing. Of course, for a tight end, not so bad, 14 points. tight ends don't usually get so much. Of course, Larry Donnell, it would have been nice to have him, but, And it's funny because actually the dreaded Pirate Redbeard had been talking to me, and he'd been talking about, oh, that's a guy to watch out for. He's been, seeming to be one of Eli's favorite targets. So that's definitely, everybody knows about him now, but, definitely a guy, if you can pick him up, pick him up. Then at kicker, we had Dan Carpenter, not so good. Yeah, that was. Now it's time for Upon Further Review.
Upon further review.
And this Upon Further Review, we'll be going over the Thursday night game, and that'll be between the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. That's the Week 5 matchup between these two NFC North Division rivals. And they will be playing this game on October 2nd at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can catch that on the simulcast between CBS and the NFL Network. So these two teams are heading into this game 2-2, as these division rivals are going to be battling it out. They're in a tie for second place, a three-way tie with the Bears as the third team, and the Lions are in first place at 3-1. So this is a very important game for both these teams, especially for the Packers, as they can ill afford to lose a division game at home. The Vikings, this one would go a long way towards possibly winning the division title, which seemed impossible just a week or so ago, but now is a possibility once again, because after the month of September, it's anyone's division as we enter October. And Teddy Bridgewater looked very impressive in his first start as an NFL quarterback for the Vikings, as he had 317 passing yards in his debut as a starter. Of course, he had debuted the week before. He had some limited time. He had 150 yards in that game. So total so far between those two performances, he has already 467 yards off of just 50 pass attempts. He hasn't thrown a touchdown yet, but he hasn't thrown an interception either. So he's been looking really impressive in that limited action. He's already shown definitely that he has tons of potential, and sky's the limit for Teddy Bridgewater. Of course, the Vikings are going to need to get strong performances from McKinnon and from Asiata in their running game there. McKinnon had a huge week in Week 4 against the Falcons as he ran for 135 yards, and Asiata had 3 touchdowns. So they can perform like that and keep the time of possession running and keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, then the Vikings have a chance. But I'll tell you, the Packers, after going down hard to Seattle in Week 1 and then bouncing back in that comeback at home against the Jets in Week 2, then they went to Detroit and lost. But now, after Week 4, that big win in Chicago, even though they did let up over 500 offensive yards to the Bears, they only let up 17 points. They put up 38, and they really looked impressive. And now they're going back home for their second home game of the season, and they're hosting the Vikings, and they're looking to really put up some points and put up some numbers, as Aaron Rodgers is just 1 yard shy of 1,000 yards on this young season. He's already thrown for 999 yards and 9 touchdowns and just 1 interception. So Aaron Rodgers has been on fire, especially he was on fire last week as he threw for 302 yards as he hit the 300 mark for the second time. In both of the Packers' victories so far this season, he's gone over 300 yards, whereas in both of their losses, he was held to below 200 yards. So that's something to definitely look out for, because that's going to be a huge factor in this game. Is going to be how much yards is Aaron Rodgers, going to be able to put up. Of course, he's got the targets. He's got Randall Cobb. He's got Jordy Nelson, and they're two of the top receivers. They always put up big numbers, and they've been putting up some big numbers in the last few weeks. It's just last week, Cobb had 113 yards. And then the other win back in Week 2, Nelson had 209 yards. So get a big performance out of those guys, that will go a long way towards victory for the Packers. We actually go inside the stats and we actually look at the passing numbers for these teams. So far this year, the Packers are 15th in the NFL with total team passing yards. Minnesota Vikings, on the other hand, they're 25th. So not exactly big stats, of course. A lot of that has to do, it's a young season still, whereas the Packers' numbers shouldn't go up as they should keep climbing up on the stat chart. Whereas the Vikings, that remains to be seen. And if you look at the passing defense, the Packers are 5th in the league in passing yards allowed. So they're really good against the pass, whereas the Vikings are 17th in the league in passing yards allowed. So they do have some holes in their passing defense, whereas the Packers, they've got a better, passing defense for sure. So definitely the advantage in the passing game is on the favor of the Packers, without a doubt. Of course, if you look at the running, though, on offense, the Vikings are 8th in the league in rushing yards. So they average the 8th most rushing yards. They've been running the ball even without AP. They're doing a really good job running the ball. And the Packers, though, have been struggling to run the ball as they're 28th in the league when it comes to rushing yards. So Packers struggle to run the ball. So the clear favor when it comes to running the ball is with Minnesota. So the Packers, they're the better passing team. The Vikings are the better running team. Of course, if we look at their defense, though, when it comes to stopping the run, the Vikings, middle of the road with stopping the run. They're 15th in the NFL with stopping the run, and the Packers are actually dead last when it comes to stopping the run. They are the worst. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the numbers last week. Just Matt Forte put up pretty good numbers against them, so that right there bodes pretty well in the Vikings' favor, and that's going to make this game an interesting game. If you look inside those numbers, as I was saying to begin with, the key is for the Vikings to run the ball and keep the ball out of the hands of Aaron Rodgers. If they can do that, they have a chance. Of course, Aaron Rodgers needs very little time to score. They're such a potent, high passing attack of the Packers that they just let it go. They let it fly. They get down the field. Aaron Rodgers throws more passes to his receivers than any other quarterback in the NFL. It's been that way for a long time, and he airs it out. He's the best at throwing the long bomb, throwing the deep route, and just the give and go. It's impressive, and they span the length of the field in less than 2 minutes without a problem. Definitely they can score in under 3, that's for sure. I mean, the Packers, with the way that they play, sometimes it seems as if they can just score at will. Of course, other times, it kind of depends on what plays that they're calling. That's why, it seems that at the end of a half, at the end of the first half, you see that they'll all of a sudden come out with a huge play with like no time on the clock. And at the end of the game, you never count them out, because as long as Aaron Rodgers has even one possession with the ball, he can make something happen. Even just one play, that's all he needs. Give him 2 or 3 plays, give him like 30 seconds on the clock, even give him a minute, he's good to go. So really the key for the Vikings is they just gotta score early, and they gotta score often, and they gotta just keep running and keep wearing down the Packers defense, keep the Packers defense on the field. Of course, I don't think it's gonna matter either way if they can do that or not. I actually think that the Packers are gonna whoop them pretty bad, in my opinion. Of course, I would not be surprised though if this ends up being a close game and being within one possession. Either way, though, I think the Packers win. Whether they have to come from behind, whether they just blow them out, they're gonna win this game, in my opinion. This to me is like the most sure thing of the week. Even is the Packers right here in Lambeau Field. I would be shocked if they lost this game. So it's just really a matter of how much are they going to win by. It's going to be close. It could be. It's possible. It is close. But I don't really think it will. I think the Packers will end up winning by like 10 points. But I won't be surprised if it comes down. And I'd like to see a close game. It'd be more exciting. As a fan, I like to see it come down to the end and be entertained for every single moment. I watch even the blowouts regardless. But hey, give me a good game. That's always the best, right? So that's what I think is going to happen. Let me know in the comments below what you think is going to happen. I'm very interested to hear all of your opinions about the game tonight and about the whole show in general. So thank you very much for listening to Upon Further Review and listening to the whole entire show, The Wedge. It's been fun doing the show, as it always is. We love football, and we love doing the show, and we love just watching the football every week. Is something I do just for the love and for the fun of it. And I greatly appreciate everyone listening. Make sure if you did enjoy the show, hit the like button and subscribe. Because each and every week we bring you this show, The Wedge, and we also bring you recaps for every single game. We also bring you Upon Further Reviews for every single game, so keep an eye out for those, as we'll be doing bonus Upon Further Reviews for all the other games happening on Sunday and Sunday night and Monday night, and we'll be uploading those as the games come closer. Just keep an eye out. We usually put up some on Friday, some on Saturday, and if there's any we haven't yet put up, they'll be up by Sunday morning, and then usually the Monday night one is up by Monday morning. And then we get the recaps out there as soon as possible once the games happen and once we watch the games and go over all the stats and everything. So, once again, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate you listening. Hope you're having a great day and have a great weekend and enjoy the Thursday night game and a beautiful autumn weekend with some great football and, of course, the Sunday night and the Monday night games. I know I'll be watching, I'll be enjoying them, and I hope you will also be enjoying them. Whether you're watching the games or not, enjoy your weekend.